Ross Merriam side of things, the mono blue aggressive deck you believe to be favored against Temur Elementals.
I do. I think that if your opponent doesn't have a ton of interaction in general, the mono blue deck, if it has a decent draw, is going to be relatively favored thanks to cards like Curious Obsession, just kind of steamrolling your opponent. But if your opponent goes really wide on you, then that can change in a hurry. You know, if your opponent deploys 4 or 5 creatures in the first 3 or 4 turns, and you don't really put a lot of pressure on them because, you know, you don't have that Curious Obsession draw, things can get out of hand really quickly from the Temur Elemental side.
Reasonable start for Muller. He shocked to 18 for a turn 1 Llanowar Elves, now has an Incubation Druid on 2. Merriam had a turn 1 Siren Storm Tamer, which is now bumping Muller to 17. No follow-up on turn 2, though.
Yeah, but that could mean he just has a flash creature in hand or a counterspell at the ready. He has 3 copies of Wizard's Retort, 2 copies of Lookout's Dispersal, and even a Spell Pierce here could be enough to handle that Nisu Shakes the World.
Yeah, Nisu Shakes the World, hit by Lookout Dispersal. That's a pretty big win for Merriam as we go back his way.
Yeah, luckily, Siren Storm Tamer is actually a Pirate Wizard, so it actually shrinks both Lookout's Dispersal and Wizard's Retort. He's kind of the key one-drop creature in the deck because it enables both of those 3-mana counterspells.
Well, now it's a Curious Pirate Wizard. Muller to 15, Merriam draws an extra card. He's hit his 3rd land drop, so could have another one of those now 2-mana counterspells. We'll see what Muller has to say about it. Tamiyo, Collector of Tales.
If I'm Ross, I'm not really that afraid of this card. It kind of accrues card advantage over time, but it doesn't really affect the battlefield that well. The problem is that it rebuys things that do affect the battlefield, so if Ross wants to take care of it, he can.
So Merriam did catch it with Wizard's Retort. Muller plays a Temple of Mystery, scries, and attacks Merriam to 19 with the Llanowar Elf.
Yeah, and that just effectively using his mana efficiently by casting the Wizard's Retort, even though the Tamiyo is not incredibly backbreaking.
Well, here's a big reason to counter anything cast, a 2nd Curious Obsession on the Storm Tamer.
Yeah, now we really got the gears flowing here. Drawing 3 cards a turn. Ross probably knows that Muller doesn't have a whole lot of interaction in his deck. Just a lot of value type stuff. And Muller looks like he's already dead. He's already checked out. Both those big cards got countered. He's got a Leafkin Druid as one of the last 2 cards in hand. And he's already got head in hands. This is turn 5.
Muller's on 12. Tempest Djinn is the follow-up for Merriam. A lot of flying power on the other side of the table. Not much game left here.
Yeah, Curious Obsession is one heck of a card. And if your deck doesn't interact very much, there's not a ton you can do about it.
And with that 2nd Obsession and the Tempest Djinn naturally having 4 toughness, with only, well, actually no elementals currently for Muller, Omnath wouldn't even be good here. A lot of his deck is just not going to do it. Just had a tap Stomping Ground before Merriam will go ahead, play an island, and attack for 8.
Yeah, attack for 8 and draw 2 cards. Now, every counterspell he finds is going to be good. You know, he has something like Dive Down or whatever to protect, maybe.
So Muller's to 4. Merriam's going to opt in the 2nd main phase. Looks like the decision is close. He's thinking about the scry.
It's probably another creature, and he's just curious if he wants a creature or to find another piece of interaction. Because he's got lethal on board with the Tempest Djinn. But if Muller finds a way to deal with it, or something like Hydrocrisis comes down, you know, he may just want a little more pressure.
He decides to scry to the top. He'll draw whatever it was and pass to Muller. Incubation Druid's going to grow to a 3/5. Muller draws for turn.
Well, he didn't concede yet, so
needs something big. Risen Reef is not. It's a start. It draws a card.
Paul in the tank here. I know he can play the Leafkin Druid. Get another draw from the Risen Reef.
So he uses Incubation Druid to cast the Leafkin Druid as 1 mana floating. Triggers the Risen Reef.
Yeah, I think that should do it.
Yeah, that just put a land on the table.
I think if he had a Hydrocrisis, he would have just cast that for X equals, 5 or 6 instead of casting the Leafkin Druid, and he's going to pack it in. And there you saw Mono Blue doing his thing. Curious Obsession on 3 after going 1 drop into Counterspell. And Paul Muller, without any real interaction in game one, has work cut out for him here after sideboard.
Yeah, and these are kind of the matchups where your opponent's slide under removal doesn't really present too many spells that you care about. Merriam just with 2 counter spells, and the easy Curious Obsession win kind of does the mono blue thing.
Yeah, but after sideboard, things are going to get a lot more tricky for Ross. He's going to need to sweat Veil Summer. I think that card's going to be quite good in this matchup. But I also think you want to get really into being interactive if you're Paul. Maybe cut some of your more clunky elementals, maybe some of your planeswalkers like Tamio. You want to get in Lava Coil. I think that card's quite good. Fry seems obvious for an inclusion. Even something like Entrancing Melody is just some amount of interaction on those creatures, and I think you want it. And then last but not least, the second Chandra Awakened Inferno. We saw it do so much work yesterday, and even so much work today so far.
Yeah, so some nice improvements on Muller's side. Let's see what Merriam can bring to the table. He has a Surge Mare, a Tail's End, 2 Ether Gust, 2 Essence Captures, 3 Cerulean Drakes, 3 Entrancing Melodies, and 3 Negates.
So I've talked to Ross quite a bit. He likes Entrancing Melody against basically any deck that has Hydroid Crisis. It's also great at just stealing some of those cheap mana creatures. I do think that Entrancing Melody should come in. Ether Gust is a no-brainer. Takes care of the Chandra Awakened Inferno with it on the stack. Stops almost every card in Paul Muller's deck. 2 mana, just an insane card. Essence Capture, I think, is also pretty good. Paul Muller's deck is really creature dense. And then Surge Mare has a really high toughness, so it doesn't die to Lava Coil. And it also is effectively unblockable in the matchup, so putting a Curious Obsession on it is quite strong.
So Ross Merriam is playing against Elementals in this matchup, but we launched a Ross Merriam Elemental token as part of our personality token thread we have going on here, which you can get in July and August of this year. A few others there. Sam Black getting a clue. Very fitting there. You see him holding the Lantern of Insight.
Yeah, he is quite the tinkerer.
So you get your set of these 5 tokens with entering in any Star City Games Open or Classic and a purchase of $20 or more over on StarCityGames.com. Get to check out invitational qualifiers as well. You get the Cedric Phillips Zombie Army.
That one's the best, but I wish all the zombies in the background had been Cedric's too.
That would have been nice, yeah.
Because, I mean, as far as the zombies are concerned, they all kind of look the same, but Cedric's zombie token is awesome. Ellen Bogan as a vampire looks dope. Although they're out in the sun, I don't really get that. Are they just immune to sunlight?
Vampires work differently
They're
in different
daywalkers?
worlds. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fine.
A lot of sunscreen, I guess. Ross Merriam Elementals, we mentioned. Look at that
elemental
beard.
is way too buff. Not to call Ross out on not being very buff.
Sam Black, there it is, the Lantern of Insight, the clue token. And Dylan Hand, the Elemental. Maybe someday Voice of Resurgence will be playable again.
Maybe. But today is not that day.
But yeah, as mentioned, we can get these sets of tokens in any Open or Classic. Purchase $20 or more on the website. Maybe pick up your cards you need for the Elemental deck. Get these tokens with it. Or check out an IQ near you. As we play Season 2, building up to SCGCon Winter, featuring the Invitational.
Both players here, veterans on the SCG Tour. Paul Muller putting up a strong finish in Season 1, looking to effectively clinch his spot in the Players' Championship at the end of the year via an at-large bid. Unless, of course, he has a stellar Season 2 and puts himself into the top 3 performers. But I feel like if he puts himself somewhere in the top 10, that should give him enough yearly points to make it into those extra slots that we give away at the end.
Yeah, definitely good start to the tournament today. If you can keep having tournaments like this, you should be able to pull it off.
Yeah, Paul is most notably known for playing Storm in Modern. Has recently been a pretty big proponent of Hogak before the Bridge from Below banning. But it's good to see him kind of stretching his legs in Standard and making a good run here.
Muller keeps on 7. Merriam will mulligan. Taking a trip to London. I do like the London mulligan for decks like this that are really efficient and also have kind of linchpin cards. You know,
for sure.
1-drop Island Curious Obsession that's a pretty good 3-card hand.
Right. No, I mean, I definitely agree. I think the London mulligan really puts a spotlight on decks that really revolve around 1 or 2 cards, but not necessarily in an extremely healthy way, in my opinion. I think that there's a chance that it's a bit too good for Modern, just because it allows decks like Tron to be able to mulligan to 3 or 4 and still just function as normal. I know I've won multiple games in Modern already with the London Mulligan with Tron, just by, hard mulliganing every hand that was actual bad.
Tron's been doing that for like 8 years already, right?
Yeah, but they could almost never win a game when they mulled to 3 or 4.
I don't think that's true. I lost to a lot of 3 and 4 card hands from Tron already.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Have you ever played like Cryptic Command before Field of Ruin? That was a bad matchup.
I mean, sure. It's mostly that they just function on all cylinders when they're mulliganing to 3 or 4. Whereas before, if they're mulliganing to 3 or 4, the 3 or 4 had to be stellar. Now it's just your 7 has to be okay, and 3 or 4 cards need to be kept among those,
It seems like Ross found at least an okay 6 here as players are running away. Muller with the ideal start. Llanowar Elf into Risen Reef puts a breeding pool on the table. Merriam at a turn 1 Terramander.
Now, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but that's why Llanowar is in the deck. It's not an elemental. There are elementals that do ramp. We're already playing 4 copies of Leafkin Druid, but we want more, and we want to be faster. Llanowar is just the linchpin for any green deck in this standard format, really.
Notably, Terramander is a...
Woo!
Well, it's really good here. Double Curious Obsession, any 1 drop will do. Muller is 17, draws 2. What I was going to say is Terramander is a card that the mono blue deck's cooled off on a little bit. Only 2 copies in the deck. But anything will carry an Obsession.
Now, I'm really curious here if Muller has access to a Lightning Strike, a Lava Coil, a Fry, something to take care of this Terramander, because if he doesn't, and that does not look like a face of a man who can answer that Terramander.
Well, the choking point might be red mana, just blue and green so far.
Sure.
Well, there's a red source, but it's a temple.
Oh, no.
I think you might be seeing the reason for their frustration. Scry to the top, though. Here's Leafkin Druid. Draws the card with Risen Reef. Oh, it's a Steam Vents tap, though.
Yeah, it does enter the battlefield tapped, but that does give him access to a second red. And if I'm not mistaken, he does have a Chandra Awakened Inferno next turn, which he can cast. And that's only turn 4. Ross is going into his turn 3 right now. And he's drawing a bunch of extra cards, but that Chandra cannot be countered. He's going to need Dive Down specifically to protect this Terramander. And considering that the Temur Elementals decks don't play a ton of spot removal, there's a chance that Ross just went away from the Dive Downs and just doesn't have access to one.
Yeah, so he makes his 3rd land drop, knocks Muller to 14, draws 2, but he's got to do something about this Chandra. Can't be countered. Can be Ether Gusted.
Yeah, if he has Ether Gust, this could be a great spot to use it, but he's just going to have to face it down again next turn. But he's going to get to draw 2 more cards with the Terramander, so... Oh, it looks like he pulled an Ether Gust to the front. This seems like a no-brainer, but we'll see what he does.
Would you like to put that on the top or the bottom of your library?
Reporting for duty.
Top. Ether Gust, any spell or permanent that's red or green. Its controller puts it on the top or the bottom. Here's an attack with Risen Reef, Merriam to 17. Right now, that game is about that Chandra.
Well, I think it's more about the Terramander with the Curious Obsessions. Now, even if Muller has the answer for it with the Chandra, Ross is at a spot where he knows what's happening next turn, and he gets to draw a bunch of cards, and now he can just deploy a couple more threats. This is, of course, turn 4. He's got Muller down to 11 already. But he's just got, 8 or 9 cards in hand because those Curious Obsessions have now each drawn 3 cards.
Interesting draw for Merriam, too. Now, he can't really deploy more 1 toughness threats, but he found Tempest Djinn, which would survive the activation of Chandra.
Yeah. Now, he's going to read this card just to make sure he knows exactly what it does. -3 does 3 to all non-elemental creatures, so it would kill the Llanowar Elves, but leaves those 2 other elementals intact. And it would kill the Terramander if it doesn't go above a certain amount of toughness. Muller could also choose to just minus directly on it if he's afraid of... well, I don't know what he could be afraid of, really, but,
So here's the Tempest Djinn, Merriam leaving up 1 blue. So about the only thing Muller would worry about here would be Dive Down, right?
Yeah, Dive Down would be a nightmare because it protects the Terramander no matter what. Either gives it +3 toughness to survive the Sweeper effect, or gives it Hex-proof to dodge the targeted effect.
Islands, the land for turn for Muller. Plenty of mana available here. Going to tap 6 of it, or 8 of it. Maybe a Hydroid Krasis? Krasis it is. X equals 6. They'll go to 14 and draw 3.
It's a pretty good one, and it's one Ross might not be prepared to actually deal with right this moment. But if he just goes untap and Entrancing Melodies, the 6/6 flyer, I don't know how Muller gets out of it. And you have to imagine Ross knows that Krasis is a huge part of this deck. And it's one of his only ways to get such a large creature off the battlefield. And honestly, it's one of the main reasons why it's in the sideboard to begin with.
Yeah, so Muller will pass. No attacks into the Jin. Go back to Ross Merriam. Draws for turn. Looks like 8 cards in hand now. His Obsession's doing some work. Plays Island for turn.
Ooh, Merfolk Trickster here is a pretty nice one. Taps down the Krasis. Lets him attack in here for 8 damage. Knocking Muller down to 6 and drawing 2 more cards.
Another nice swing in Merriam's favor. And with Merfolk Trickster staying in the deck, card's been around for a while, with Unsummon being a pickup for the core set, the deck has a decent amount of play against Hydroid Krasis.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of annoying just because it's a big body, gains some life and draws a card, but there's a lot of ways to manage it. There's not a lot of ways to permanently deal with it.
The discard to hand size is Spectral Sailor. That's got to raise some suspicion from Muller.
I cannot imagine that Muller's going to make it out of the next turn alive. If you're discarding a flash creature here in the face of a Chandra minus,
here's a tap for 6, including the Llanowar Elf, because by Muller's estimation, that's going to be dying to this Chandra. Chandra's cast. Merriam responds with Opt. Perhaps is missing on an Ether Gust.
Yeah, he's only got 2 in the sideboard. Personally, I'm a huge fan of the card. I would just load up on him. The red cards are generally the ones that are going to give you a lot of trouble as the mono blue deck.
So Opt scried to bottom. Now that Chandra resolves, it's going to be a -3. Merriam will opt again. This time looking for dive down, I imagine. Scries to the bottom. Picked up Entrancing Melody.
Yeah, and that if he has a land, that's just good enough. His 2 creatures die, the elf dies. As long as Muller doesn't have another follow-up here that gains life. If he has a Hydro Krasis, that's bad. Ooh, this is also really good. Cavalier of Thorns is huge here.
Ooh, some issue with the mana, though.
Oh, no, I forgot to float.
He needed to float with the Llanowar Elf still on the table. The Leaf Druid can only tap for 1.
Yeah, and Ross Merriam here going to play his 6th land. He's going to steal that Hydro Krasis, and Muller is going to take the L.
You can see it on his face. He is not happy about this. Attack with Risen Reef. Merriam to 16. Just has to pass. Wow. End step. Here's another Spectral Sailor. Go back to Merriam. We know about that Entrancing Melody. Muller does have some other cards in hand, so theoretically there's something that Merriam has to play around, maybe a negate.
I mean, even a Veil Summer here would be quite good for Muller. It would counter the Entrancing Melody and draw a card. I think if you're Ross, you just have to go for it. He probably has Wizard's Retort in hand, and he's thinking about waiting a turn, but Muller's already given away that he has the Cavalier of Thorns in hand. I think you just got to go for it, man.
Yeah, it doesn't get better over time against more blockers.
And against more Chandra activations.
Right.
The more time you give this Team Rare Elementals deck, it's just going to bury you. It has so many cards that say draw a card on it effectively.
Here's a tap of 4. There's the Melody. I would like to gain control of Hydroid Krasis.
Yeah, but if Paul has the Veil of Summer here, this could do it, and he doesn't.
He's got nothing. Ross Merriam advancing to 10-2. Paul Muller falling to the same record, notably was in first place, a little bit ahead of most of the field going to the round. Things still okay, but he does